Stop scrolling for 30 seconds, because what you're about to hear could unlock something ancient inside you. Have you ever had a strange feeling, as if you were supposed to remember something, but couldn't? Not a name, not a date, but a truth, something immense, as if your soul once knew something the world has tried to bury. If that resonates, you're not alone, because there's a forgotten structure, an invisible temple, that once stood within every human being, a sacred architecture that connects the soul to something far beyond this world. And long ago, humanity walked inside that temple every day. We remembered who we were. We remembered why we came. But then, the doors were sealed. This temple has no name in modern science, no mention in your history books, but ancient mystics across cultures described it with striking similarity. The Vedic sages called it the inner sanctum. The Egyptians spoke of the Hall of Ma'at. The Gnostics described it as the pleroma, where divine sparks rest. And today we call it something far more mundane, consciousness. But what if that word barely scratches the surface? What if your consciousness is not just a byproduct of your brain, but the key to re-entering this sacred temple that was hidden from you? What if everything that feels wrong with your life, your uncertainty, your fear, your inner conflict, is just a side effect of being locked outside of it? And what if today, you begin to remember the way back in? You were born into a world that forgot the map. From the first breath, you were taught how to survive, but not how to awaken. You were told who you were, but not asked who you remembered being. The language of the soul was replaced with noise, comparison, performance. But you didn't choose amnesia. The path to your inner temple was obscured for a reason, and not by accident. Because a human being who enters that inner temple cannot be controlled. They no longer live in fear. They no longer obey the illusions of lack, guilt, or division. They become sovereign, not just spiritually, but psychologically and energetically. And that has always been dangerous to the systems that thrive on unconsciousness. According to an obscure manuscript known as Tabula Caelestis, the celestial tablet, the human soul carries within it a multi-chambered temple constructed before birth and designed for one purpose: to remember the divine spark within. 7 chambers, 7 activations, 7 sacred trials. These are not physical places, but living states of being. Each chamber corresponds not just to a spiritual truth, but to an existential shift in perception. And once you begin to remember them, your life begins to realign. Let's journey through these 7 chambers together. Each one brings you closer to who you really are. Chamber 1, the Hall of Echoes. This is where your story begins, long before birth. In the Hall of Echoes, your soul listens to the resonance of all the lives it has ever lived. You hear your past laughter, your past tears, your past wisdom, your past regrets. This is where you remember that your life is not your first, and likely not your last. The patterns that repeat in your life, the relationships, the fears, the inner themes, they are not coincidences. They are echoes, reverberations of unresolved experiences. When you listen closely, you begin to trace the thread. What cycles am I repeating? What lesson have I avoided, lifetime after lifetime? This chamber doesn't judge. It reflects. And reflection is the first step toward awakening. Chamber 2, the Mirror of Choice. Once the echoes have spoken, you arrive at a mirror, but it does not show your face. It shows your will. Here, your soul made the choice to incarnate. It chose this timeline, this century, this body, this set of experiences, not because they were easy, but because they were necessary. You didn't come here to be perfect. You came here to transform. You chose to experience challenge, not to be punished, but to develop strength. You chose heartbreak, not to suffer, but to understand love at a deeper frequency. You chose limitation, not to be small, but to learn how to transcend it. This mirror asks you, can you remember why you said yes to life? Chamber 3. The Circle of Contracts. Next, you enter a chamber surrounded by luminous presences. These are not strangers. These are the souls you travel with across lifetimes. Some will be friends, others will be rivals. Some will break your heart, others will mend it. But each one is a contract. You made sacred agreements before coming here. To learn, to teach, to trigger, to heal. When you see someone who activates something deep in you, rage, attraction, fear, awe, that's not random. That's a soul knocking at the contract door. What if every difficult person in your life is a teacher in disguise? What if the ones who wounded you most loved you most before this life began and agreed to play that role so you could awaken? Hard to believe? Yes, but transformation rarely begins with comfort. Chamber 4. The Veil of Forgetting. This is perhaps the saddest chamber and the most necessary. To play this game of life fully, your soul agreed to forget all of the above. Forget the echo. Forget the choice. Forget the contracts. You were born crying, not just from the trauma of light and sound, but from the spiritual disorientation of amnesia. And yet, within the veil, there are cracks. Dreams, synchronicities, déjà vu, that feeling of I've been here before. The veil isn't permanent. It's porous. And when your soul is ready, it begins to remember. You watching this now? That's a crack in the veil. Chamber 5. The Trial of Meaninglessness. Every soul eventually reaches a point of crisis. You look around and nothing seems to matter. The job, the routine, the normal life, it all feels hollow. This is not depression. It's not failure. It's the trial of meaninglessness. And it is sacred, because from this emptiness, you begin to crave something real. You begin to ask dangerous questions. You begin to dig through the rubble of society's illusions, searching for your own truth. This trial breaks many, but for those who endure it, a new path opens, and that path leads straight to the next chamber. Chamber 6, the Flame of Sovereignty. In this chamber, you stop looking outside for authority. No guru, no dogma, no ideology. You realize, I'm my own sacred ground. The flame of sovereignty is not ego, it's essence. You stop obeying the inherited rules of others. You start listening to the quiet voice that is always whispered within you. This is the fire that cannot be extinguished. It was placed in your soul before time began, and once lit, it lights the way for others. If you felt the urge to guide, to create, to break cycles, that's the flame beginning to speak. Chamber 7, the Throne of Return. Finally, you arrive at the last chamber, and it isn't an ending. It's a beginning. Here, you sit on the inner throne of remembrance. You realize the temple was never destroyed, only forgotten. The soul never left you. You only stopped hearing it. This chamber is not about perfection. It's about presence. You walk back into the world, not as someone seeking meaning, but as someone carrying it. You remember who you are. Not a title, not a story, not a role, but a luminous fragment of consciousness, brave enough to forget and courageous enough to remember. Final reflection, why it was hidden. So why was this hidden? Because a society built on fear cannot survive a people who remember their light. Because the systems that dominate this world thrive when you believe you are powerless, lost, and alone. But the temple within you was never destroyed. It only waits for silence, for listening, for courage. Now the doors have opened. You've walked the path, and the truth has found you. Will you turn back, or will you walk forward, carrying the memory of your soul and becoming the guide you were once waiting for? If this message stirred something ancient within you, you're not alone. Let others find their way back. Share this video. Leave a comment about what chamber spoke to you most. Subscribe for more journeys beyond the veil. This is the Philosophy Glitch, and your awakening has already begun.